Welcome to episode 5 of Finding Myself After Domestic Abuse. I'm Mary Golick. This is my personal story. It is not specifically about all the horrible things that happen in bad relationships, but it's more about how my world totally fell apart and then reclaiming my sense of identity afterwards, what that process looked like for me of putting the pieces back together. And it might not look like anybody else's story, but I hope it is still interesting, helpful, and inspiring. We are on, at this point, the aspect of life purpose and work. Career, vocation, that type of thing, the thing you dedicate your life to. Here we go. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy it. All right, so last time I had talked about the sexual piece and meeting potentially my twin flame and all of that chaos. So now, as appealing as it was to think that possibly I had found my person, I knew that the relationship was never going to happen until I really found myself, including my sense of purpose, and until I really healed myself. One thing that fell apart during the divorce was also my career. I thought I had found my vocation when I completed a master's degree in counseling, while simultaneously carrying and birthing 4 babies plus a miscarriage. Well, some questionable ethical decisions that took place around the time of the divorce led to an eventual boot from my job. And that led to a period of healing the countless wounds that had been stacking up faster than I could acknowledge them, and a lengthy process of figuring out how I wanted to progress with work and figuring out what did I truly feel called to do. I was trying to make decisions now, just in general, that were based on what I truly wanted rather than what society dictated or what friends expected. And I now understood that those friends were not necessarily going to be there in the next 5 years anyway. Nothing in life is stable. Friends, family, jobs, living situations can all disappear. The only constant you have in life is yourself. So you can choose to always take care of yourself, support yourself, and stand up for yourself, because you can't count on anybody else. So, realizing that, I started trying to really live for myself. The problem was, it was difficult to know who I truly was and what I truly wanted underneath all the layers of everything else going on in my life. Still, I tried to go inside in my own head and ask, what do I want to do? And every time I asked this, the answer always came back, write. Be a writer. And I would say, but I don't know how to be a writer, or that's not going to make any money, or I don't know how to make money with that. But I kept noticing it over and over. This is months and months, like maybe a year or more even. And I kept it in mind for the longest time. And then eventually, I happened to just get so frustrated with how things were going with my twin flame, special friend, that person, that I decided I wanted to manifest it going differently. So I thought I would give it a shot, because I started to really believe in manifesting too. So I thought the way I would go about this would be to write a story that used symbolic um, imagery detailing the struggles and obstacles that I was going through. So, sort of my real life, real world, and also internal psychological troubles, and put them in a fairy tale format. I made a 16 chapter book, and I was sure to close it with a happy ending. And I thought that was enough, but clearly it wasn't, because that was exactly the point where he blocked me for a long stretch, and it did end up being a little over a year. So, during our separation, I wrote a second 16 chapter book, and I felt more convinced that this one would work. As I wrote each of these books, the process was the same. I sat down with the intent to manifest my perfect union, and I did not say it quite like that, but it was more like, bring insert person's name here closer to me. Then I wrote whatever came. I used the process of stream of consciousness, writing whatever came into my head without thinking about it. It often felt like gibberish, but I wrote it down anyway. One book I had read lately had been Carl Jung's Red Book. If he could write down all of that weird inner dialogue, then so could Mary Golick, because the Red Book is really, really weird, and he's famous, so. Additionally, I'm in love with the book Fantastes by George MacDonald. If you haven't read George MacDonald, you need to. He's fabulous. So I was quite married to the idea of it taking a fairy tale format. That's where I got the fairy tale idea from. But also just the archetypal language of any type of mythos is fascinating and beautiful to me. In blending concepts primarily from those two books, I generated my manifestation works. I'm incredibly proud of them, but also grateful to them. They've guided me through challenges and showed me my path in ways that would be hard to believe. For example, during the years after the divorce was finalized, the year after, I saw a therapist. She was cute and pretty smart, but she kept showing resistance to me wanting to talk about the domestic abuse and other trauma. Several times she asked what she could do for me. I said, the biggest thing is just don't abandon me. She said, okay, I can do that, with a smile. After several months of me insisting that I wanted to heal from the trauma and not just do skills exercises, she refused to see me. She wouldn't even do a closing session, justifying that email was fine. At this point, if you did not see episode 2 about abandonment and betrayal, you should watch that, because there was a lot of it. And if you've survived domestic abuse or really any type of significant trauma, you came out of it probably with some abandonment wounds. So, sad to say, I was quite suicidal. Again, because of seeing a therapist. The thing that finally snapped me out of that, more or less, was this overwhelming, sudden sense that if I killed myself, I just saw it somehow killing my twin flame, my person, that special person in my life. Probably doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really make any sense. But I just somehow in my head symbolically felt this way. And the idea of hurting them made it seem impossible for me to follow through with that. So I sort of snapped out of it and was able to stop some of that ideation. Oh yeah, I also texted him right after that and was like, promise me you're never ever gonna hurt yourself. And of course he didn't respond because he was still not talking to me. So the story about my therapist stands alone as having a lot of emotions worth sharing, but there are really 2 points of why I bring this story up. There's two main reasons why this is important in this context. So even after the suicidality stabilized, the abandonment sat with me. I was really going through it emotionally and having a hard time. So I went back to my story, the one I had written about a year before that. And in the story, there's a point where the protagonist, me, meets a desert hermit who helps nurse her back to health on her journey. And she's sort of a wise mentor figure until one day she just doesn't return from going out. The girl searches for her, and then has a period of mourning, and then continues on her quest. So my own brain had written me an instruction manual. My story helped me to focus on moving towards my goals. And remember that I wrote this story before the event with my therapist. And it really, truly did give me the comfort and courage that I needed to move forward. The second important aspect is that I learned I never want to do that to a client, to re-traumatize their abandonment wounds, especially enough to stir up suicidality. And I'm not really afraid that I would do that as a counselor, but I do think there's a serious flaw in the system where this is sort of the norm. And some of you are probably saying, that's not the norm, that's ridiculous, but I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard stories from friends, I've had my own personal experiences, and that is the perspective that I have. So basically, I made the decision that I was not going to pursue trying to get back into the counseling world. It was not the professional world that I wanted to be in. Which left me with the practical question of what can I do with a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling other than be a therapist. And it also created a spiritual question of how do I explain that I have this desire to work with people. I have an aptitude for counseling. I was really good at it. And I get a sense of fulfillment from that type of work. When I was in school, I had done practice sessions with some friends as I was going through my program, just practicing out the different skills. And those always went really well. And so did my paid sessions after I was licensed. So what I started to think is I wonder if there's a way that I could do some of that work that's not explicitly counseling. So then I started thinking seriously about life coaching as a profession. Counseling did seem like a good fit for me until you consider the fact that I hate rules, working for other people, keeping fixed hours, having a cap on my income, and being forced to diagnose every person that comes through the door just for the sake of insurance. Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy diagnosing, and I'm pretty good at it, I think. But overall, I find it unhelpful and not really the most appropriate skill for helping people. The number one issue I found with the industry is the overall attitude of not wanting to heal people. I find that there is much more of a push for coping skills and for medical intervention, which actually just works to bury a person's trauma deeper down, and they end up finding more ways to just cope and mask around it rather than actually going directly to it and healing it. I find this to be a great disservice to people. So, I want to be a writer and a life coach. Currently, I have finished my first 2 fairy tale books and started the third. I hope to publish them someday. While I was on a trip 9 months ago, I'm not sure, in Sequim, Washington, to visit my musician uncle and his beautiful wife, I found a book in a local bookshop called Writing to the Bone. I picked that up and bought it and read it, and it reinvigorated me with a sense of vocation to writing. So at that point, after that trip, I began writing every single day in some form. And I still don't see exactly where the money will come from, but there you have it. I want to write and coach. You figure out the inside first, who you are, what you want, and then the outside matches from that. That's how manifestation works. And I do have a large book idea in my head that I have kind of sketched out on a Google document. And I see this concept as my opus, my big work. And I hope I'm able to bring it to the light of day one day. Please come back for my next video, which will be on ancestral wounds and ancestral healing. God bless.